The telegram sat on Zachary Irving's desk like an accusation, its terse words announcing that his mail-order bride would arrive in Fort Yuma, Arizona Territory on the evening train. He read it again, his calloused fingers tracing the letters as though they might rearrange themselves into something less final. 28 years old, and he had never intended to marry for love, that foolish notion that got men killed or worse, distracted from building something that mattered. His ranch needed a woman's touch, someone to cook and clean and eventually bear children to inherit the land he was carving from this unforgiving desert. That was practical. That made sense. The June heat of 1878 shimmered across the dusty Main Street as Zachary adjusted his hat and walked toward the depot. Fort Yuma sprawled along the Colorado River, a vital crossing point where the railroad now connected California to the Eastern Territories. The town bustled with soldiers from the nearby military post, traders, and settlers all chasing their own version of tomorrow. Zachary had claimed his piece of that future 3 years ago, filing on 600 acres of scrubland that he had slowly transformed into viable cattle country through sheer stubbornness and dawn-to-dusk labor. He had written to an agency in San Francisco with the same methodical approach he used for everything else. Age, open to 20 to 30. Temperament, calm and practical. Skills, cooking, sewing, general household management. He had been honest in return, describing his property, his prospects, and his expectations. The woman who responded had seemed perfect on paper. Theodora Zimmerman, 23, recently orphaned, with experience managing her late father's boarding house in Sacramento. Her letters had been brief and factual, matching his own tone. No flowery declarations, no romantic nonsense, just an agreement between two adults entering a mutually beneficial arrangement. The train whistles split the air as Zachary reached the platform, and he felt his jaw tighten. A knot of anxiety he refused to acknowledge as nervousness twisted in his gut. He told himself it was simply the uncertainty of bringing a stranger into his home, into his life. Nothing more complicated than that. The locomotive hissed to a stop in a cloud of steam and coal smoke. Passengers began to disembark, dusty and weary from their journey. Zachary scanned the crowd, looking for a woman traveling alone, someone who matched the single photograph Theodora had sent. The image had been small and unclear, showing a woman with dark hair and a serious expression, but little else. Then he saw her, and every practical thought in his head scattered like tumbleweeds in a windstorm. Theodora Zimmerman stepped down from the passenger car with a carpetbag in one hand and a hat box in the other, and she was nothing like the sepia ghost in that photograph. Her chestnut hair caught the late afternoon sun, revealing threads of auburn and gold. She wore a traveling dress of deep green that had probably started the journey crisp and neat, but now clung to her curves in ways that made Zachary forget to breathe. But it was her face that truly undid him. High cheekbones, full lips, and eyes the color of strong whiskey that swept the platform with an intensity that suggested she was cataloging every detail, every possible threat or opportunity. Those eyes found him and held, and Zachary realized he was staring like a fool. He stepped forward, removing his hat. "Miss Zimmerman, Mr. Irving." Her voice was lower than he expected, rich and warm despite the dust in her throat. "I apologize for my appearance. The journey was longer than anticipated." "You look fine," he said, then felt heat creep up his neck at how inadequate the words were. She looked magnificent, and that was a problem he had not anticipated. A slight smile played at the corner of her mouth. "You are kind to say so, though I suspect we both know I look like I've been dragged behind the train rather than riding inside it." Before he could formulate a response, she continued, "I have 2 trunks in the baggage car. The porter said they would be unloaded shortly." Zachary nodded, grateful for something practical to focus on. "I will see to it. My wagon is just across the street. We have about an hour's drive to the ranch." "That is acceptable." She set down her bags and stretched her arms slightly, a gesture so unself-conscious and human that it somehow made her even more disconcerting. "I confess I am eager to see my new home." He retrieved her trunks, loading them into the wagon while Theodora waited in the shade of the depot's overhang. When he handed her up onto the wagon seat, the brief touch of her gloved hand against his sent an unwelcome jolt through his system. This was not how this was supposed to go. She was supposed to be practical, suitable, ordinary. Not this vibrant creature who seemed to carry her own weather system of energy and life. The wagon rolled out of Fort Yuma as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and crimson. The Colorado River glittered to their left, a ribbon of life cutting through the desert. Theodora was quiet beside him, but he could feel her attention taking in everything: the scattered homesteads, the distant mountains, the vast expanse of sky that seemed to go on forever. "It is beautiful," she said finally. "Different from California, but beautiful." "It is hard country," Zachary replied, feeling obligated to set realistic expectations. "The summer heat can kill. Water is scarce except near the river. The Apache mostly keep to their reservations now, but there are still raids sometimes. Rattlesnakes, scorpions, dust storms. It takes a certain kind of person to thrive here. Then I suppose we shall discover if I am that kind of person." She turned to look at him directly, and he nearly drove the wagon off the road. "I did not come here expecting comfort, Mr. Irving. I came here to build a life. Those are rarely the same thing." He had no answer to that, so they drove in silence for a while. The road, such as it was, wound through scrubland dotted with mesquite and palo verde trees. In the distance, his cattle grazed small brown shapes against the golden earth. "Those are yours?" Theodora asked. "About 200 head. I started with 50. The herd has done well." "You should be proud. It is just work. Work you have done successfully. That deserves acknowledgement." Zachary glanced at her, unsettled by the directness. Women in his limited experience either simpered or scolded. Theodora seemed to be doing neither, just stating facts as she saw them. It reminded him of how he approached the world, and that similarity felt dangerous. The ranch house came into view as the sun touched the horizon. It was not much, a simple adobe structure with 4 rooms, a covered porch, and a few outbuildings. Zachary had built it himself with help from neighboring ranchers, making it solid and functional if not beautiful. He saw Theodora's expression remain carefully neutral as she took it in. "The house is small," he said, defensive despite himself. "But it is well built. The roof does not leak. The walls stay cool in summer and hold heat in winter." "It is more than I expected," Theodora said. "My father's boarding house was large but belonged to his creditors when he died. I have lived in a single rented room for the past year. This seems palatial by comparison." He helped her down from the wagon, and this time her hand lingered a moment longer than necessary. Her eyes met his, and he saw something in them that made his pulse quicken. Not calculation, but curiosity, assessment, maybe even approval. "I should show you inside," he said, his voice rougher than intended. The interior was sparse but clean. He had spent the past week scrubbing and organizing, aware that it still looked like exactly what it was, a bachelor's dwelling. The main room served as kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace and a simple table. 2 bedrooms opened off the main space, and he had put fresh sheets on the bed in the larger one for her. Theodora walked through slowly, running her hand along the table, examining the simple shelves he had built, looking out the window that faced east toward the sunrise. "You keep it very tidy." "I cannot abide mess." "Neither can I. We are compatible in that regard, at least." She turned to face him, and the dying light through the window illuminated her profile. "Mr. Irving, I believe we should discuss the practical arrangements of our situation." "I thought we might eat first. I have stew on the stove." "Food can wait. This cannot." She folded her hands in front of her, the picture of composure despite having traveled for days to marry a stranger. "You wrote that you wanted a wife to manage your household and eventually provide children. I agreed to those terms. However, we are still strangers. I propose that we take time to become acquainted before we formalize this marriage. I will fulfill the household duties we discussed, but as for the rest, I think a courtship period, however brief, would be wise." Relief and disappointment warred in Zachary's chest. "That seems reasonable." "I will sleep in the room you have prepared. You will maintain your own quarters. We will spend the coming days learning each other's habits and temperament. If at the end of a week we still find this arrangement suitable, we can travel to Fort Yuma and speak with the circuit judge about making it legal. And if we do not find it suitable, then I will use the return ticket I purchased before leaving Sacramento, and we will part as friends who made a reasonable attempt at an unreasonable situation." Her chin lifted slightly. "I will not trap you, Mr. Irving, nor will I allow myself to be trapped." He nodded slowly. This was exactly the kind of practical, straightforward approach he should appreciate, so why did it sting a little? "Then we have an agreement, Miss Zimmerman. Theodora, if we are to be married, you should call me by my given name, Theodora." The name felt strange on his tongue, intimate. "I am Zachary, though most call me Zach. I prefer Zachary. Zach sounds like something you would name a horse." A smile played at her lips, and he realized she was teasing him. When was the last time anyone had teased him? Despite himself, he felt an answering smile tug at his mouth. "I will endeavor to live up to the full dignity of my name. See that you do." The stew was better than Zachary expected, probably because his standards had dropped to merely edible years ago. Theodora ate with appetite, complimenting the seasoning, though he suspected she was being generous. They talked carefully over the meal, discussing practical matters like where supplies were kept, when the cattle needed tending, how far to the nearest neighbors. "The Carlsons have a spread about 5 miles north," he explained. "Samuel and Martha. Good people. They have 4 children. Martha would probably welcome female company if you are inclined." "I would like that." Theodora sopped up the last of her stew with a piece of bread. "I am not accustomed to isolation. It can be difficult at first, the silence." "I do not mind silence. I mind loneliness." "Those are different things." Again, that directness that cut through his defenses. Zachary stood collecting the dishes. "I will wash up. We will wash up together." Theodora rose as well. "If I am to manage this household, I need to learn how you organize things." They worked side by side at the wash basin, her shoulder occasionally brushing his arm in the small space. She asked questions about where things belonged, committing his answers to memory. The simple domesticity of it felt strange and right all at once, like stepping into a life he had not known he wanted. When the dishes were clean and put away, Theodora stifled a yawn. "I apologize. The journey has caught up with me. Of course. I will let you rest." She paused at the door to her room. "Zachary, thank you for being honest with me about all of this. I do not know how to be anything else." "Good, neither do I." He lay awake in his own bed long after her lamp went dark, listening to the familiar night sounds of the ranch and the unfamiliar presence of another person breathing in the next room. This was supposed to be simple. A transaction. an arrangement that made practical sense for them both. But nothing about Theodora Zimmerman felt simple, and Zachary suspected his carefully ordered world was about to be thoroughly disrupted. Morning came with the relentless brightness that defined Arizona summers. Zachary was up before dawn as usual, feeding the horses and checking the cattle in the near pasture. When he returned to the house, the smell of coffee and frying bacon greeted him. Theodora stood at the stove, her hair braided and pinned up, wearing a simple work dress in faded blue. She had found his apron and tied it around her waist. The sight of her there in his kitchen, making breakfast as though she had done it 1,000 times before, hit him with unexpected force. "I hope you do not mind," she said, glancing over her shoulder. "I woke early and thought I might as well be useful. I do not mind." He hung his hat on the peg by the door. "You found everything all right. Your organization is admirably logical. The eggs were where any sensible person would keep them." She slid bacon onto a plate and started scrambling eggs in the same pan. "How do you take your coffee? Black?" "Of course you do." There was that hint of teasing again. She poured 2 cups and brought them to the table along with the food. "You strike me as a man with no patience for frills." They ate together, the conversation easier than the night before. Theodora asked about his routine, and he found himself explaining the rhythm of ranch life, the seasonal demands, the constant vigilance required. She listened with genuine interest, asking intelligent questions that showed she was thinking about how to fit herself into this life. "I can help with the cattle," she said. "I can ride, and I am not afraid of hard work." "You can ride." "My father owned 2 horses for the boarding house. I rode almost daily before he died." "The work is different from pleasure riding," her eyes flashed. "Then teach me." "I did not come here to be decorative, Zachary. I came to be useful." He nodded, chastened and oddly pleased by her spirit. "We could ride out this morning. I need to check the water sources in the eastern section. You could come along, see more of the property." "I would like that very much." An hour later they were riding across the open range, Theodora on a gentle mare named Sage and Zachary on his gelding, Scout. She sat her horse well, comfortable and confident despite the unfamiliar terrain. The morning was already growing hot, but a breeze off the river made it bearable. Zachary pointed out landmarks as they rode, explaining the boundaries of his property and his plans for expansion. Theodora absorbed it all, occasionally offering observations that showed a shrewd mind for practical matters. "You could dam this wash," she said at one point, indicating a dry creek bed. "Catch the runoff when it rains. Create a reserve water source." "I have thought about it. The labor alone would take months. Then we hire help. The investment would pay over time." "We," he repeated. "You are already thinking in terms of we." She looked at him steadily. "If I am going to do this, I am going to do it completely. Half measures serve no one." They stopped near a steep spring where water bubbled up from the rocks, creating a small oasis of green in the brown landscape. The horses drank while Zachary and Theodora sat in the shade of a cottonwood tree. The silence between them had changed since yesterday, becoming more comfortable, less weighted with uncertainty. "Why did you really come here?" Zachary asked. "A woman like you could have had her pick of suitors in California." Theodora was quiet for a long moment, her eyes on the distant mountains. "My father died owing significant debts. There were men willing to settle those debts in exchange for my hand, but they were not men I could respect. Older men looking for a young wife to show off, or gamblers like my father who would have squandered any dowry I might have earned. I wanted a fresh start, and I wanted to choose my own path, even if that path led to marrying a stranger. That took courage, or desperation." She smiled wryly. "Perhaps both. And now that you are here, Do you regret it?" She turned to face him fully, and the directness of her gaze made his heart stutter. "No, you are not what I expected, Zachary Irving, but I do not regret coming. Ask me again in a week when the newness has worn off and we have had our first argument, but right now, in this moment, I am exactly where I want to be." Something loosened in his chest, a knot he had not realized was there. "I am glad you came. Are you?" Her voice was softer now, almost teasing. "You seem like a man who treasures his solitude." "I did. I do. But solitude and loneliness are different things, as you said last night. I think I have been lonely longer than I cared to admit." Theodora reached out and touched his hand, a brief gesture that sent warmth racing up his arm. "Then perhaps we can be lonely together, until we figure out how not to be." They rode back to the ranch house in companionable silence, but Zachary's mind was racing. This woman with her sharp tongue and sharper mind, her courage and her vulnerability carefully hidden beneath practicality. She was working her way under his skin faster than he knew how to handle. He had wanted simple, and Theodora Zimmerman was anything but. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Theodora took over the household with efficiency that bordered on artistry, transforming the bachelor quarters into something that felt like a home. She cooked meals that were actually worth eating, organized his chaotic storage, and even started a small garden near the house where she planted vegetables and herbs. But she did not confine herself to domestic duties. Each morning she rode out with him, learning the land and the cattle, proving herself capable and uncomplaining even when the work was hard and dirty. They talked constantly, the conversation flowing easier each day. Theodora had opinions on everything from politics to poetry, and she was not shy about expressing them. She challenged Zachary's assumptions, made him laugh, infuriated him with her stubbornness, and impressed him with her insight. She was nothing like the quiet, biddable wife he had imagined, and he was discovering he did not want quiet and biddable. On the fourth evening, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. Theodora had made lemonade from precious lemons she had brought from California, and the tart sweetness matched the sharp pleasure of her company. "Tell me about your family," she said. "You never mentioned them." Zachary was quiet for a moment, old grief stirring. "My parents died of fever when I was 16. I have a brother somewhere back east, but we lost touch years ago. He thought I was crazy to come out here. Were you, probably. But I needed to build something of my own, something that was not connected to all the things I had lost." "I understand that." Theodora's voice was gentle. "After my father died, I could not bear to stay in Sacramento. Every street reminded me of him, of his failures and his broken promises. I needed distance to become myself rather than just his daughter. And have you become yourself?" She laughed, the sound bright in the gathering dusk. "I am working on it. Some days I feel like I am still figuring out who that person even is. You seem very certain to me. That is because you cannot see inside my head where everything is questions and doubts." She turned to look at him. "Do you know what I thought when I first saw you at the station? That I looked like every other dusty rancher in Arizona. No, I thought you looked lonely and kind and strong, and I thought that maybe I could build a life with a man like that. Then I worried that I was seeing what I wanted to see rather than what was really there." Zachary's throat felt tight. "And now I think I was right the first time. You are lonely and kind and strong, but you are also stubborn and set in your ways and terrible at expressing your feelings." "I express my feelings. You expressed them exactly once yesterday when you said you were glad I came. Every other emotion I have had to deduce from context and observation." He knew she was right, and the knowing made him defensive. "I am not good with words. Then be good with actions." Theodora stood, her lemonade finished. Tomorrow is Sunday. The Carlsons invited us for dinner after church services in town. I accepted. You accepted without asking me. I did. You spend too much time alone, Zachary. It is making you forget how to be around people. Maybe I like being alone. No, you do not. You like safety. Being alone feels safe because no one can disappoint you or leave you or die on you, but it is not the same as liking it. Her voice was sharp now, frustrated. I will not live like that. I will not build a life where we hide from the world on this ranch and speak only in practical sentences about cattle and weather. If you want someone like that, you chose the wrong woman. She went inside, leaving Zachary sitting in the dark, his chest tight with emotions he could not name. Anger, yes, but also recognition. She had seen through him so easily, identifying the walls he had built and refusing to accept them. Part of him wanted to reinforce those walls to protect himself. But a larger part, a part that was growing stronger every day he spent with her, wanted to tear them down entirely. He found her in the kitchen, washing the lemonade glasses with more force than strictly necessary. Theodora. What? She did not turn around. You are right, I hide. I tell myself it is practical and self-sufficient, but mostly I am just afraid. She stopped washing, her hands still in the water. Afraid of what? Of this, of you, of feeling things that could hurt me. He stepped closer, close enough to see the tension in her shoulders. I thought if I married someone practical and suitable, I could have a life without risk. A partnership based on mutual benefit rather than messy emotions. But you are not practical and suitable. You are complicated and passionate, and you make me feel things I swore I would never feel again. Theodora turned to face him, her hands dripping water onto the floor. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Is that so terrible? It is terrifying. Good. She wiped her hands on her apron, her movements jerky with emotion. You should be terrified. I am terrified. But at least we are terrified together. Zachary closed the distance between them, his hands coming up to cup her face. Her skin was warm, slightly flushed from the heat and the argument. I want to kiss you. Then kiss me, you frustrating man. He did, and it was nothing like the chaste kiss of a practical arrangement. It was desperate and hungry, weeks of tension and attraction igniting between them. Theodora made a small sound of surprise that melted into pleasure, her hands fisting in his shirt to pull him closer. She tasted like lemonade and something sweeter, something that was uniquely her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Zachary felt like the world had tilted on its axis. Well, Theodora said, her voice shaky. That was not very practical. No, it was not. I think we should do it again anyway. So he kissed her again, slower this time, savoring the softness of her lips, the way she sighed against his mouth. His hands moved to her waist, and hers slid up to tangle in his hair. They stood there in the kitchen, the dishes forgotten, discovering each other with touch and taste and small sounds of pleasure. When they finally separated, Zachary rested his forehead against hers. We should still wait for the wedding. I know, I want to actually. Not because of propriety, but because I want our wedding night to mean something. I want it to be a beginning, not just a conclusion. 3 more days until the week you asked for is up. Then in 3 days we will go to Fort Yuma and make this official. She smiled, her fingers still playing with the hair at the nape of his neck. Unless you have changed your mind about marrying a complicated, passionate woman, not a chance. Sunday arrived bright and clear. They dressed in their best clothes. Theodora in a dress of deep blue that made her eyes luminous, and Zachary in the suit he had purchased years ago and rarely wore. The drive to Fort Yuma was filled with easy conversation. The awkwardness of the previous week burned away by honesty, and that kiss in the kitchen. The church service was held in a simple building near the fort, with a traveling preacher delivering a sermon about faith and perseverance. Zachary barely heard it, too aware of Theodora sitting beside him, her shoulder brushing his, her voice joining the hymns in a clear alto that made his heart ache. Afterward, they met the Carlsons, a weathered but cheerful couple who greeted Theodora with warmth. Martha Carlson embraced her like a long-lost friend. "You cannot imagine how happy I am to have another woman nearby. The men around here are wonderful, but they do not understand the need for conversation that does not involve livestock prices." The Carlson children ranged from 6 to 14, all freckled and exuberant. They peppered Theodora with questions while Samuel and Zachary talked about water rights and the upcoming roundup. But Zachary kept glancing over at Theodora, watching her interact with Martha and the children with easy grace. She was a natural, he realized. She belonged here in this life, in this place. Dinner was a boisterous affair at the Carlson Ranch, with too much food and too much laughter. The children performed a small play they had been rehearsing, and Theodora applauded enthusiastically. Martha pulled her aside after the meal, and Zachary saw them talking intently, heads bent together. When he and Theodora finally left, the sun setting behind them, she was quiet but content. "What did Martha say to you?" he asked. "She told me that you have been alone too long and that she was glad you found someone. She also warned me that ranch life can be harder on women than men, and to come to her if I ever needed help or just company. She is right, on both counts." Theodora reached over and took his hand, lacing their fingers together. The gesture was simple but profound, a claiming and a promise all at once. "Zachary, I think tomorrow we should go to Fort Yuma and talk to the judge. I do not want to wait any longer. I know what I want now." His heart was pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. "Are you certain, completely?" "Are you?" He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "I have never been more certain of anything." The next morning they made the journey to Fort Yuma, both dressed in their Sunday clothes once again. Judge Harlan Patterson held court in a small office near the fort, a gruff but fair man who had presided over everything from claim disputes to murder trials. He looked up from his paperwork as they entered, his bushy eyebrows rising. "Zach Irving, did not expect to see you in town on a Monday." "I came to get married, Judge." Patterson's gaze shifted to Theodora, and something like approval flickered in his eyes. "I can see why." "Miss, you understand what you are getting into, marrying this stubborn cuss." "I believe so, Your Honor, though I suspect I will spend the rest of my life discovering new dimensions of his stubbornness." Patterson barked a laugh. "I like her. She has sense. You have witnesses." "We can find some," Zachary said. "No need. My clerk can witness and I will grab someone from the street." Patterson stood, surprisingly spry for a man in his 60s. "Let us make this official before one of you comes to your senses." The ceremony was brief and practical, exactly the kind Zachary had always imagined. Theodora's hand was steady in his as they spoke their vows, her voice clear and strong. When Patterson pronounced them husband and wife, Zachary kissed her there in the dusty office, sealing their partnership with all the passion he had tried to deny. They walked out of the judge's office as Mr. and Mrs. Irving, the afternoon sun bright on their faces. Theodora was smiling, her eyes bright with emotion. "Well, husband, what shall we do now? I thought we might get dinner in town, celebrate. I would rather go home." She squeezed his hand. "Our home." They stopped at the general store long enough to purchase a few supplies and to let word spread that Zachary Irving had gotten himself hitched. By the time they left, half the town would know, and Zachary found he did not mind. Let them know. Let them see that he had found someone extraordinary. The ride back to the ranch felt different, weighted with new meaning. Everything looked the same, the dusty road, the scrubland, the distant mountains, but Zachary saw it all through fresh eyes. This was the world he would share with Theodora. These were the sunsets they would watch together, the land they would build on, the life they would create. When they reached the house, he helped Theodora down from the wagon, but instead of releasing her, he swept her into his arms. "What are you doing?" She laughed, her arms going around his neck. "I read once that husbands are supposed to carry their brides over the threshold. It is tradition." "Since when do you care about tradition?" "Since about 5 minutes ago." He carried her inside, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in the middle of their home. She looked up at him, her expression shifting from amusement to something deeper, more intense. "I am nervous," she admitted. "Is that foolish?" "No, I am nervous too." "You do not look nervous." "I am an excellent liar when I need to be." She laughed again, and the sound eased some of the tension. Zachary cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones. "We do not have to rush. We have all the time in the world. I do not want to wait. I just want to be sure you want me, not just the idea of a wife. Theodora." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the tip of her nose. "I wanted an idea. I got you instead, and you are so much better than anything I imagined. You are brave and smart and beautiful, and you make me want to be more than I thought I could be. So yes, I want you, specifically you. Only you." She kissed him then, deep and searching, and he felt her nervousness transform into something else, something bold and hungry. They moved together toward the bedroom, shedding clothes and inhibitions, learning each other with touches that started tentative and grew confident. Zachary had been with women before, but never like this, never with his heart so thoroughly engaged. Every sigh, every gasp, every whispered encouragement from Theodora felt like a revelation. They made love as the sun set, painting the room in shades of gold and crimson. It was awkward at moments, both of them learning what pleased the other, but it was also tender and passionate and profoundly right. When they finally lay tangled together in the aftermath, Theodora's head on his chest and his arms wrapped around her, Zachary felt a peace he had not known in years. "I love you," he said into the quiet. The words felt strange and new, but also true. "I did not think I would, did not plan to, but I do." Theodora lifted her head, her eyes searching his face. "I love you too. I think I started falling the moment I saw you at that train station, looking so serious and uncertain, but I was afraid to admit it, afraid you only wanted practicality. I thought I wanted practicality. Turns out I wanted you." She kissed him again, slow and sweet. "Good. Because you are stuck with me now. I can think of worse fates." They lay together as the stars came out, talking and touching and occasionally falling into lovemaking again, each time with growing confidence and deepening connection. This was nothing like the practical arrangement Zachary had envisioned. It was better, richer, more complicated, and more rewarding. The months that followed were not without challenges. August brought heat that made the desert feel like an oven, and Theodora struggled with it at first, though she never complained. They had their first real argument when Zachary made a decision about selling some cattle without consulting her, and Theodora let him know in no uncertain terms that she was his partner, not his employee. "You cannot make major decisions without talking to me," she said, hands on her hips, eyes flashing. "This is our ranch, our livelihood. I have a right to be part of that conversation." "I have been making these decisions alone for years," he shot back, defensive. "Well, you are not alone anymore. You married me, remember, for better or worse, and this is some of the worse if you insist on treating me like a child." He opened his mouth to argue further, then stopped, really hearing her. She was right. He had asked her to be his partner, and that meant actually treating her as one. "You are right. I am sorry. It is habit, but that is no excuse." The anger drained from her face, replaced by surprise. "You are apologizing. I was wrong. You deserve to be consulted, respected." Theodora crossed the room and kissed him. "That is the most romantic thing you have ever said to me." "Me admitting I was wrong is romantic. For you." "Absolutely." They made a pact that night to discuss major decisions together, and Zachary found that her input often improved his plans. She had a head for business and an instinct for people that complemented his understanding of the land and livestock. Together, they made the ranch more successful than Zachary had ever managed alone. September brought cooler weather and the roundup. Zachary hired 3 men from town to help, and Theodora worked alongside them, riding hard and helping with the branding. The hired hands were skeptical at first, but she won them over with competence and good humor. By the end of the week, they were joking with her like she was one of them, while still treating her with the respect due the boss's wife. In October, Theodora missed her monthly courses and realized she was pregnant. She told Zachary one evening over dinner, her voice casual but her eyes bright with emotion. "I think I am carrying your child." Zachary set down his fork, his hand shaking slightly. "You think or you know?" "I know. All the signs are there." He was around the table in an instant, pulling her into his arms. "Are you happy about it?" "Terrified and happy." "Are you the same?" He kissed her temple, then knelt so he could press his ear to her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, this is your father." "I am fairly terrible at this, but I promise to do my best." Theodora laughed, running her fingers through his hair. "You are going to be wonderful." "How can you be so sure?" "Because you love fiercely when you allow yourself to, and this child is going to be so loved." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through fall and into winter. Theodora remained active, insisting she was not fragile, though Zachary worried constantly. Martha Carlson visited often, giving advice and sharing stories of her own pregnancies. The 2 women had become close friends, and Zachary was grateful Theodora had someone to talk to about the aspects of pregnancy and childbirth that terrified him. Christmas came, and they celebrated quietly at the ranch, exchanging simple gifts. Zachary gave Theodora a locket with space for a photograph of their coming child. She gave him a new pocket watch engraved with their initials and wedding date. They made love gently that night, mindful of her growing belly, and Zachary marveled at how his life had transformed in less than a year. The baby came in late May of 1879, arriving with the spring wildflowers. The labor was long and difficult, with Martha assisting and Zachary pacing outside, feeling helpless and terrified. When he finally heard the baby's first cry, he nearly collapsed with relief. Martha emerged, grinning. "You have a son. Big, healthy boy with a good set of lungs. Your wife wants to see you." Zachary entered the bedroom to find Theodora exhausted but radiant, holding a red-faced infant swaddled in blankets. She looked up at him with such love that his heart felt too large for his chest. "Come meet your son." He approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the tiny face. The baby had stopped crying and was looking around with unfocused eyes, one tiny fist waving in the air. "He is perfect," Zachary whispered. "He is. What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months without settling on one. Now, looking at his son, Zachary knew, "Thomas, after your father. He made mistakes, but he raised an incredible daughter that deserves to be honored." Theodora's eyes filled with tears. "Thomas Irving, I love it." Zachary carefully took the baby, cradling him with terrified gentleness. Thomas made a small snuffling sound and seemed to settle in his father's arms. "Hello, Thomas. Welcome to the world. Your mother and I are going to do our best not to completely ruin you." "We are going to do better than that," Theodora said firmly. We are going to love him and teach him and show him that passion and practicality are not opposites, that you can build a life on both. Fatherhood transformed Zachary in ways he had not anticipated. He had thought marriage changed him, but watching his son grow added another dimension to his capacity for love. Thomas was a cheerful baby, quick to smile and curious about everything. Zachary found himself working faster, finishing chores earlier so he could spend time with his family. Theodora thrived as a mother, though she also insisted on maintaining her role in running the ranch. She fashioned a sling that allowed her to carry Thomas while she worked, and the baby seemed to enjoy being part of the action. By the time he was 6 months old, he was accompanying them on rides around the property, taking in the world from the safety of his mother's arms. The ranch continued to prosper. They bought adjacent land when it became available, expanding their holdings. Theodora's idea about damming the wash proved successful, and they built a reservoir that ensured water even in dry years. They hired a permanent hand, a young man named David who was reliable and hardworking. When Thomas was 2, Theodora became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and their daughter arrived on a snowy February morning in 1881. They named her Eleanor after Zachary's mother. Eleanor was quieter than her brother, more observant. She had her mother's eyes and her father's serious expression. Zachary adored her instantly, this tiny person who seemed to study the world with patient intensity. "We make good babies," Theodora said one night, nursing Eleanor while Thomas slept in his small bed across the room. "We make good everything." Zachary sat beside them, his arm around his wife's shoulders. "You know, when I sent that letter to the marriage agency, I thought I was being so practical, finding a sensible solution to a practical problem. And instead you got me. Instead I got you, and you turned my practical arrangement into something passionate and messy and wonderful. You made me feel things I was afraid to feel. You made this house a home and gave me a family I did not know I needed." Theodora leaned into him, careful not to disturb the nursing baby. "You did the same for me. I came here running from debt and disappointment, thinking I was settling for a safe, boring life. Instead, I found a man who loves me fiercely, who treats me as an equal, who gives me space to be myself. You gave me everything, Zachary. We gave each other everything." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children sleep and dream. Outside, the desert night was cold and clear, the stars brilliant in the unpolluted sky. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled and one of the horses answered with a soft whinny. This was home, Zachary thought. Not just the house or the land, but this feeling of completeness, of being exactly where he belonged with the people who mattered most. He had thought he wanted practicality, but Theodora had shown him that passion was not the enemy of stability. That love did not make you weak, it made you stronger. That opening your heart was not a risk, but an opportunity. The years continued to roll forward, bringing new challenges and new joys. Thomas grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved the ranch and everything about it. Eleanor was quieter but equally devoted to the land and the animals. When Thomas was 8 and Eleanor 6, Theodora became pregnant one last time, and they welcomed another son, whom they named Samuel after their friend and neighbor. Samuel was a surprise in many ways, arriving 10 years after Thomas when they had thought their family complete. But he fit into their lives perfectly, a happy baby who grew into a sweet-natured child. Thomas and Eleanor doted on him, and Zachary often found all 3 children piled together, reading or playing or just being together. The ranch had become one of the most successful in the territory. They ran over 1,000 head of cattle now, and the house had been expanded twice to accommodate their growing family. Zachary had built Theodora the kitchen she wanted, large and well-equipped, and she used it to feed not just their family but the steady stream of neighbors and friends who visited. On their 10th anniversary, Zachary took Theodora back to the spot near the Seep Spring where they had talked on one of their first rides together. The cottonwood tree had grown, providing more shade, and someone, probably him in a moment of sentiment he barely remembered, had built a simple bench beneath it. They sat together, watching the sun set over the land they had built together. Thomas was watching his younger siblings back at the house, giving his parents a rare evening alone. "Do you ever regret it?" Zachary asked. "Coming here, marrying me," Theodora laughed, the sound as bright and warm as it had been 10 years ago. "Not for a single moment." "Do you regret writing to that agency?" "I regret thinking I wanted someone practical and boring. Thank God they sent you instead." "I was not what you asked for. You were exactly what I needed, even though I was too foolish to know it." He took her hand, running his thumb over the calluses she had earned from ranch work. "You made me believe in love, Theodora. Real love, not the practical partnership I thought was enough. You showed me that passion and commitment are not opposites, that the best life is built on both. You did the same for me. I thought I was coming here to be safe, to hide from the world. Instead, you taught me to be brave, to take risks, to build something meaningful. You gave me a life I am proud of." He kissed her as the sun touched the horizon, the sky blazing with color. After 10 years of marriage, kissing her still felt like coming home and setting out on an adventure all at once. They walked back to the house hand in hand as the stars emerged. Through the window, they could see Thomas reading to his younger siblings, Alina's dark head bent over a book of her own, Samuel playing with wooden horses on the floor. Their family. Their life. Inside, the children greeted them with hugs and questions about their ride. Theodora started preparing dinner while Zachary listened to Thomas read, one arm around Alina and Samuel climbing into his lap. This was everything he had never known to want, this messy, noisy, passionate life. Later, after the children were asleep and he and Theodora lay in bed, she turned to him in the darkness. "Zachary, I am glad you are a terrible liar. What, when we first met, you said you were an excellent liar when you needed to be, but you are not. I can always tell what you are feeling, even when you try to hide it. Your face gives you away," he laughed quietly. "Is that so?" "Yes, and I love that about you. I love that even when you try to be practical and stoic, your heart shows through. You made it safe to let it show." She kissed him, slow and sweet. "We made it safe for each other." The years continued their march, bringing the expected challenges of raising children and running a ranch in Arizona territory. There were droughts and floods, cattle diseases and market fluctuations. There were moments of worry when one of the children fell ill, moments of pride at their achievements, moments of frustration when they tested boundaries. Through it all, Zachary and Theodora remained partners in every sense. They made decisions together, supported each other through difficulties, and celebrated successes as a team. The passion that had surprised them both in those early days never faded, though it matured and deepened into something richer than simple desire. Thomas grew into a capable young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. Alina proved to have a gift for horses, training them with patience and intuition that amazed everyone. Samuel, the surprise baby, turned out to be the family scholar, always reading and asking questions about the wider world. When Arizona achieved statehood in 1912, the Irving family celebrated along with their neighbors. Thomas was married by then to a schoolteacher from Yuma, and they had given Zachary and Theodora 2 grandchildren. Alina had married a veterinarian and lived in Tucson, visiting often with her own growing family. Samuel had gone east to university, breaking his father's heart and making him proud in equal measure. Zachary was 62 now, his hair silver and his face weathered by decades of desert sun. Theodora was 57, still beautiful, still passionate, still his perfect partner. They sat on the porch of their home one evening, watching the sunset as they had done countless times before. "We did all right, did we not?" Zachary said, reaching for her hand. "We did better than all right. We built a good life, raised good children, loved each other well. I keep thinking about that letter I wrote, asking for someone practical and suitable." Theodora laughed. "You certainly did not get what you asked for. I got something infinitely better. I got you, and you taught me that the best things in life are the ones we do not plan for. The surprises that append all our careful arrangements and make us feel things we swore we would avoid. You were so determined to keep your heart safe. I was a fool. The heart is meant to be used, to be risked, to be given freely. You taught me that." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from gold to crimson to purple. Behind them, they could hear the sounds of their grandchildren playing under Thomas's supervision, their laughter bright and innocent. "Zachary." "Yes." "If you could go back and change anything, would you?" "Not a single thing. Every moment, good and bad, led us here, led us to this life, this family, this love. I would not trade it for anything. Neither would I." They remained on the porch until the stars came out, holding hands and remembering the journey that had brought them from that train station in Fort Yuma to this moment of perfect contentment. Two strangers who had agreed to a practical arrangement and found instead a passionate, profound love that had sustained them through decades of life's joys and sorrows. Inside, Thomas called them for dinner and they rose together, still holding hands, still moving in the easy synchronicity of long partnership. They joined their family around the large table Zachary had built years ago, surrounded by children and grandchildren, laughter and love. This was the life he had built, not through careful planning but through opening his heart to a woman who refused to be practical, who insisted on passion and partnership in equal measure. Theodora had taken his safe, boring plan and transformed it into an adventure, a romance, a great love story. And as Zachary looked around the table at the family they had created together, he sent a silent prayer of gratitude to whatever power had sent him Theodora Zimmerman, instead of the practical, suitable wife he had requested. She had been exactly what he needed, even if he had been too foolish to know it. The evening wore on with food and conversation and the comfortable chaos of family. Later, when everyone had gone to bed or home, Zachary and Theodora performed their nightly routine, checking doors and banking the fire, moving together with the ease of decades of practice. In their bedroom, Theodora sat at her vanity, brushing her silver-threaded hair. Zachary watched from the bed, still struck by her beauty after all these years. She caught his eye in the mirror and smiled. "What are you thinking about? How lucky I am. How grateful. We both are." She set down the brush and came to bed, settling into his arms with a sigh of contentment. "We built something good, Zachary, something that will last beyond us. We did. And it started with you stepping off that train and being nothing like I expected. The best things never are." They lay together in the darkness, listening to the familiar sounds of the ranch at night. The wind in the cottonwoods, the distant call of an owl, the soft breathing of their home around them. This was peace, Zachary thought. This was love. Not the careful, controlled arrangement he had imagined, but something wild and wonderful and worth every risk. "I love you," he whispered into the quiet. "I love you too," Theodora replied, her voice soft with sleep and satisfaction. "Always have, always will." They drifted off to sleep together, as they had done for over 30 years, Two hearts that had found each other against all odds and built a life of passion and purpose. The practical rancher and the woman who had taught him that the heart's desires were not frivolous but essential, not dangerous but life-giving. Outside, the desert night spread vast and beautiful, dotted with stars and full of promise. And inside the adobe house that had grown from a simple bachelor's dwelling into a home filled with love and laughter, Zachary and Theodora Irving slept peacefully. Their story a testament to the truth that the best plans are often the ones we never make, and the greatest loves are the ones we never see coming, until they transform us completely. Their grandchildren would tell their story for generations, the tale of how their grandfather wrote for a practical wife, and received instead a passionate woman who taught him that love was not a risk to be avoided but a gift to be embraced. How two practical people found that passion and commitment were not opposites but partners, each strengthening the other. How a simple arrangement became a great romance, and how that romance built a legacy that would endure. But for now, they simply slept. Two souls who had found their home in each other, who had built a life not on what they thought they wanted, but on what they discovered they needed. And in the morning, they would wake together as they had done for over 3 decades, ready to face another day of their imperfect, passionate, perfectly beautiful life.